All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to ask you guys, if you are not speaking, to please mute to keep background noise down. Thank you. Welcome to the Creswell Planning Commission. Today is April 22nd, 2021. It is 5:04 p.m. and we have a couple guests. Welcome. All right. So far we have, it looks like everyone that's supposed to be here tonight. Jessica Landstrid, Chair, David Christopher, Ed Gunderson, Seth Clark, Susan Bennett, and Tammy Sue Shuck are all present. And then Patrick Gehring, Vice Chair, is absent tonight. Thank you all for coming. All right, did anyone have a chance to read the minutes for March 18th of 2021? Would anyone like to make a motion?
Move to approve the minutes.
Second? Ed, second? Okay.
Yes.
All those in favor of approving the minutes for March 18th, 2021, a raise of hands, please. Susan, are you not okay, because you weren't here. Okay, perfect.
Got it.
Awesome. Unanimous. Thank you so much. Okay. Next, I have audience. So I know Jim is one of them. Maddie, do you know who the other caller is?
I believe it's Nolan Boer, who represents Bridgewater Construction.
Fantastic. Welcome, you guys. Thank you for joining us tonight. And then commissioner comments. What do you guys have tonight?
I have a comment. We've talked about parking, and I almost got doored again on my bicycle yesterday. And I've been thinking that I think we'd be better off if we had the diagonal parking back again where they have bike lanes. It's more traffic calming, and it is safer for cyclists and skateboarders because you have more time to avoid getting hit if somebody's backing out than you do if somebody opens the door. And then the other thing I was thinking about, I don't know how it would be done, but it'd be nice to have decorative bollards on the overpass. I was thinking about planters that separated the bike lane from the traffic lanes. I mean, there's enough width there to do it. And if they had shrubbery in them, it'd be very beautiful. It'd be a nice entry to the city. But I don't know what the steps are to suggest that to whoever or whatever. Would calm traffic and make it much safer for cyclists and other non-motorized people. We have that speed problem on that overpass, so.
Awesome, thank you, Ed. Is there anything else?
One item.
Any other commissioner comments? No? Okay.
One item, Jessica, Chair, before you move on, I have one amendment to the agenda that I'd like to put before the commission for your consideration. We can come back to it after new business, given that our applicants are here. But the city is going to be doing an economic development project, and I need to pull or solicit interest for someone to join an advisory committee. So if you can add that to the end of this agenda, I'd appreciate it.
All right, it is done. Thank you. Okay, if no one else has anything, we will go ahead and move on to new business. And we have a public hearing tonight. So, public hearing for case number SR-2021-02, a site design review request initiated by Bridgewater Construction on behalf of Jim Brick, owner, to construct an approximately 13,200 square foot building containing 12 commercial shop spaces on tax lot 1200 at assessor's map 19-03-14-31. The property is zoned general commercial by the Creswell zoning map and is identified as commercial by the Creswell comprehensive land use diagram. The site is currently vacant. The proposal will be reviewed subject to the following sections of the Creswell Development Code. Section 2.3, Commercial Land Use Districts. Article 3, Community Design Standards. Section 4.1.400, Type 3, Quasi-Judicial Review. And Section 4.2, Site Design Review. Okay, so testimony, arguments, and evidence presented must be directed toward the approval criteria or other criteria that the speaker believes applies to the decision. The failure of anyone to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the Planning Commission and parties opportunity to respond will preclude appeal on that issue. The failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the city to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. All right, we will open the hearing. It is 5:10 p.m. The public hearing on the site design review for the brick shops, SR-2021-02, is now open. Do any commissioners have an ex parte contact, visited the site, actual or potential conflict of interest or bias to declare? No? Okay. On we go then. Maddie, would you please present the staff report?
Sure. Thanks, Chair. Welcome, Jim Brick and Nolan Boer, our applicants tonight. Thank you for your time and preparation of your proposal. I'll start tonight by reviewing some of the items within the staff report and move into the findings of fact. One thing to note is that we did do some expedited review for this project, knowing that we would like to get Mr. Brick moving on his construction. So there was a submittal provided to staff on Friday that made it into your packet, but didn't make it into the review. So there are a couple amendments to make in the findings document that I'll highlight as I move through it. And I would just start by saying thank you for the team's efforts in addressing some of the challenges and changes. This is a Highway 99 frontage property, and as we all have experienced in Creswell with the development along Highway 99 that we've seen in recent past, some of the challenges related to working with state agencies are very present, and we will continue to work through those. And I guess just from a staff perspective, I'm very appreciative of the willingness of the applicant to move through those elements. So you'll see, commissioners, before you, materials related to the brick shops, SR 2021-02. This is a very typical type of site design review for a commercial development. The applicant proposes 12 shop spaces that will be rented out to different users. A variety of different types of users are common in these facilities, so you'll see similar developments up north on Highway 99, and it provides some great opportunity for smaller businesses to operate out of shops or shop space rather than operating out of their garage and disturbing their neighborhood, which is always so it's a nice, this is, I guess what I mean to say is it's a stepping stone opportunity for folks who are starting out or growing their own business. The building, as Chair Lancer noted, is proposed to be about 13,200 square feet. So that came with a few challenges that we discussed early on, staff and the applicant discussed early on with our fire marshal related to separation of space and some of those requirements. I'm not sure if you received in your packet the pre-application notes. We have a pre-application meeting for site reviews, and I can highlight some of those items that'll come downstream. But most importantly, we're seeing an expansion of an existing use, which is always a positive thing from the city's perspective. Mr. Brick owns the property just north of the proposed development, and he recently in 2018 invested in a significant improvement to raise and retruss the roof of a building that contains 5 shops. And that's on parcel 1300, and the shops are somewhere around 7,300 square feet. So this represents a significant increase in utilization of what is now a vacant parcel. The challenges related to this site I highlighted or alluded to related to frontage along Highway 99. But in addition to that, part of our water and sewer master plan for properties along this stretch of 99 south of F Street identify a water and sewer line mainline extension that up until now, with the size of the parcel and the likely intensity of development, have been somewhat prohibitive towards new development. Mr. Brick can benefit, however, from his ownership and existing connection at F Street by being able to extend utilities through his existing property to serve the new property. When he performs that, or when he extends those utilities, he will need to consolidate the lots. But until then, he's able to maintain them separately, and functionally, they'll probably be used just the same. So you'll see that highlighted in the staff report, this effort to find another way to serve property, especially when there isn't enough real estate to merit or proportionally justify extension of mainline utilities. The proposed building will have the 12 spaces, as I mentioned. He's also included, I'd point to the elevation drawings. He's included some really nice facade improvements, which help meet a lot of our architectural design criteria. That was something that he added to his existing shop development when the new truss and new roof went on. So the buildings, I would imagine, will start to look and feel fairly consistent between those two. Let's talk about frontage improvements. The consolidation of the lots and the new development that's proposed are greatly going to expand the existing use. So the city has asked that the applicant, which is quite typical of a site review, to complete the frontage improvements along both roadways. That typically consists of a sidewalk development and any missing or absent utility facilities like curb, gutter, or sidewalk. In this case, ODOT has not required the extension of a stormwater facility. I would expect largely because the connection to another stormwater facility, I think, would be well north of this site. And the city does have a curb on F Street, but our Public Works and city engineer have requested that those improvements be completed. You'll note also that F Street is a minor collector road. So we'll be looking at standards from our transportation plan related to that street classification. In terms of, I just mentioned about utility connections, so you'll see some comments about that within the staff comments from Steve Ward, dated April 13th. And my hope is that as we move forward, the design requirements related to the frontage along Highway 99 will become more clear. We've gotten some examples and some inclination or hints at what that frontage improvement might look like, but I don't know at this time if I could say with certainty what the finished improvement will consist of. I do know that we would like to provide a pedestrian facility at some point or along that frontage, because we hear and know that a lot of folks have been the use of that area for connecting to other facilities further south and consequently north is a bit dangerous, and the shoulder is quite narrow there. Are there any questions about the staff report before I move into the findings of fact document? Okay, seeing none. Let me simply do a quick overview just for the sake of the applicant and also for everyone's edification. We did one edit on page 1. We did receive one public comment from the gentleman who lives just south of the property, and his name is Thomas Donnelly. And I'll read his testimony into the record. I apologize, commissioners, this came in today, and if I put it up on the screen, the folks on YouTube can't see it. The screen goes black. So let me read you the letter, and that way you can have a sense of the material, and everyone on YouTube can also. To me, dated Tuesday, April 20th. Sorry, I came in yesterday. Tuesday, and it's to me, it's subject case SR 2021-02. My name is Tom, and I live south of the lot at 82884 North Pacific Highway. I recently spoke with the owner of the lot, and we discussed the project and its potential impact during and after construction. He said he plans on building a fence along our property's boundary, and this might not be the right forum to bring this up, but I'm curious as to what our options are within the confines of the building and zoning code to help maximize security and privacy on that margin, both structural, fencing, and or a wall, and vegetation. Lastly, I'm hoping to finally renovate my dilapidated fence adjacent to Highway 99, and I want to take into consideration walkability for what seems to be an increasing number of pedestrians. Can this project we're currently discussing also incorporate design elements for pedestrians along Highway 99? ? Thank you for reaching out to me, and I hope my neighbor's project will be a success in supporting local small business. We're very appreciative. I wrote back to Mr. Donnelly and thanked him for providing comment. Just one note for the record is that Mr. Donnelly does live outside of city limits. His property is not incorporated within the city of Creswell. So I responded and said, we have fence standards. I don't believe the county actually requires a fence permit unless you're building a fence along one of their roadways or across a driveway or something. So he was happy to have that information and thanked me for replying. So under oral testimony number 5, we'll add Mr. Thomas Donnelly. As far as some of the requirements, our commercial development standards are fairly straightforward. This is a lot that's about 1 acre in size, and lot coverage on this 1 acre in size. Let me first start by saying the review that I put together is largely related to the new development proposed. There are only 1 or 2 places where the new development reaches into some of the old development on the northerly portion or the northerly parcel. And staff recognizes that there's a careful balance between asking an applicant to bring all of the facilities up to new or current standards versus managing and working with what's existing. So there are selective areas where the requirements necessitate crossing that boundary, but generally speaking, the review that you see before you is primarily focused on the new development. So you'll see that the building he's proposed is about 19.5 feet tall and will cover at the resulting coverage will be about 31% of that 1 acre site. He will be required to provide 10% landscaping, and I'll get back to that as we move forward. The orientation and design requirements are predominantly met. He does have 2 primary entrances to the building that will face South Front Street. There are some pedestrian connection requirements to meet regarding connections along Highway 99. There could be a proposal for a pedestrian connection to F Street if that's desired as well. In the revised drawing, there's not a drive aisle that connects those 2 buildings that's parallel to 99, which is positive. We have some special requirements when there's a drive aisle that runs parallel to an existing roadway. Thanks again for those lovely post and beam decorative facade elements. Those are really nice and add a lot of character to steel building construction, which is appreciated by the city. moving on through, let's see. He's got enough windows and doors and openings. Regarding circulation, it's pretty straightforward. We didn't have any comments, and we haven't heard anything in specific from the fire marshal related to turning radius or anything like that. You will note that the applicant will be applying to ODOT for an additional access to the south at the southernmost portion of the southern lot. So that'll be a new driveway. I believe, in my understanding and conversation with ODOT, they will ask that Mr. Brick reestablish both of those access drives and bring them up to their roadway standard, which typically are similar to the city's standard for concrete aprons and the like. I think the only thing that comes up around page 15 regarding pedestrian access and circulation, the recent revised site plan does include some more detail related to landscaping and design and parking stalls. However, I think one thing that I noticed was particularly absent was a way for a person to walk around the building or around the site in a safe manner. We have some requirements related to a continuous pedestrian walkway system. So if folks want to visit the site on foot, they have a protected crosswalk, for example, a thermostripes crosswalk, and or typically buildings, and you'll see it come up later in the review, typically buildings require a 5-foot separation between the building and where a car can park. And that can be either landscaping or some kind of walkway surface. So that often is utilized as a continuous walkway that you allow pedestrians to walk along the side of the building. So we'll ask the applicant to bring a revised site plan that shows some kind of continuous walkway system that brings people in from the sidewalk through the site. And again, staff is open to your incarnation of that design. Regarding landscaping, onto page 17, landscaping, as I mentioned, is required at 10% coverage, and you'll see that the applicant proposes to provide landscaping right at the front, which is really nice and consistent probably with his existing development, and also about 7.5 feet of a strip in the back, which is also very much appreciated because it can provide a bit of a buffer between the residential uses that are to the west of the property and his uses, which may be operating during business hours or hours that people can make noise. There are some tree requirements and shrubbery. We can certainly work through that as the applicant develops their landscaping plan. Stormwater facilities, this is a pretty, I think stormwater will be a requirement per Public Works design standards. The property currently is vacant, so it's a green field, and he's going to pave a lot of it and put a big 13,200 square foot building on it. So my expectation is that there will be some kind of drainage swale or detention facility that will help them meet their stormwater requirements. The first edit to the findings will start on page 20 regarding buffering and screening, and this simply had to do with the level of detail that was provided in the first version of the site plan. You can note under buffering and screening, under parking maneuvering area adjacent to streets and drives, that the proposal meets this criterion by providing a landscaped area between the right-of-way, future sidewalk, and parking or maneuvering areas as shown on the revised site plan. And then further, you'll see that there are some criteria related to screening and street trees. The next or additional change is on page 23, related to meeting the minimum requirement of accessible spaces. In fact, I believe 2 van accessible spaces are proposed per the new site plan. And all the applicant will need to do here is provide construction detail related to those. One note is that on the previous site plan, I missed on page 22. On the initial site plan, I believe there are 12 spaces shown on the diagram, and the applicant will need to squeeze one more space in there to meet our minimum parking requirements. Let's see. Back to page 23. The parallel motor vehicle parking spaces. None are identified. No parallel spaces are identified on the site plan as of now. But if there are, there's a sizing requirement for that, 9 by 22 feet. We need more space or longer space for parallel parking, just to help folks out. And I believe that this is the remainder of the review is related to storm drainage and erosion control, some public works items like lighting and street lights. And I mentioned and covered some of the transportation standards related to minor collector road on F and an arterial road on Highway 99 South Front Street. And I will likely, as long as there are, are there any questions before I move into the conditions of approval section? Just to be able to provide you with those edits.
I have some questions. I have a question. I was looking at the bicycle parking thing, and it says that it should be no more than 50 feet from the main entrance or closest vehicle space. And I was kind of curious because this building doesn't really have a main entrance. It's got all those little shops. And so it sounds like we haven't really covered a standard for a building like this with shops.
Well, Commissioner, I believe that the new site plan does identify some bike parking towards the front along Highway 99.
Yeah, there's bike parking there, but it's our standard.
Mm-hmm.
Location and design doesn't seem to fit this building.
I see.
So it's more of a comment. I mean,
sure,
they're doing the best they can, but it doesn't really fit this building. And the other thing was, what you touched on was this stormwater drainage and swale. And I noticed in the drawing it talks about an oil separator. And that got me thinking about, how do we know that oil separator boxes get cleaned out and the oil gets taken out? I mean, that's a question came up. I mean, if you've got a swale, it kind of takes care of itself. Mm-hmm. But if you've got a separator box, how do we know those things ever get cleaned?
Good question, Ed. I don't have a specific or concrete answer for you, but I do know, or I do believe that the separator must have some kind of failure point if the manager or owner does not clean out the oil segment of it. I would imagine it causes some kind of dysfunction to the receptacle itself. And then I also believe that I'm not sure if it falls under the same program, but I have a colleague at the city who is working on managing a program called the FOG program, and that's fats, oils, and grease. And I think that I'm not sure if it covers storm drainage, but I know for certain it covers sanitary sewer catchment facilities, so vaulted separators that are required for our wastewater system. So that's a question I could certainly ask our public works director and see if there is a management program for facilities that have oil separators as part of their stormwater detention. Because that also, our stormwater system also requires flow. And if oils are building up in our stormwater system, it certainly could cause some form of dysfunction, whether it's a clog or, a downstream impact.
But this is going to have a swale of some sort?
I don't know.
Not sure on the drawing.
I don't know if it will have a swale, except that the storm drains will have to show that they can accept the amount of water that the impervious surface is creating. And it's common that applicants sometimes use a swale or use landscaping to try to mitigate some of that. So I don't know at this time. The detail level that was submitted for the site review did not include a swale, but if one is included in the design, it will meet our public works design standards for those.
Thank you.
Any other questions before I make a couple amendments to the conditions of approval on page 30? Nope. Okay. So we're on page 30 under section F related to conditions of approval. You can go ahead and strike item 1B, as in boy, dimensions of the drive aisle, because there is none. And that was an amendment or clarification that was provided due to the revised site plan. And you can similarly strike item 3C, because also a landscaped area is provided between the right-of-way and the parking or maneuvering area. And I believe the only other item was item 10 under issuance of C of O. Drought tolerant is not hyphenated. It says Microsoft Word. And with that, I would turn it back over to Chair Lanstra and ask her to proceed with the public hearing work.
Hey, Jessica, before you start, there's a Scribner error. Under the conditions of approval, it looks like you've listed it says conditions 1, 2, 3, 3, 4, 5.
Thank you,
So
Commissioner Clark.
I think there's 18. I think there's 19 conditions altogether, not 18.
You are correct.
Thank you, Seth. All right. Do any commissioners have questions for Maddie at this time?
I have a question. I don't know if this is the right time to ask it or not, but the one thing that really tripped me up had to do with the internal walkway detail and meeting a 6-inch sidewalk requirement, I guess. Just looking at the nature of the building with every unit having a roll-up garage door, I mean, are we expecting that they're going to put down a sidewalk and have that many curb cuts? I mean, is that what we're going for?
Commissioner, you bring up a great point. I'm just gonna flip back to the section. It's on page 15 if you're following along. Continuous walkway system is somewhat it's specific in some ways, and it describes the criteria for it being direct and safe and convenient, and then it speaks to this primary entrance for commercial industrial use. And similar to the comment that Commissioner Gunderson offered earlier in this discussion, I believe that our design standards may not be quite in keeping with this style of building, where there are several unique openings or doorways, especially for industrial commercial uses. I would consider this sort of a commercial industrial type development, because each of these units are going to have tradespeople or certain kinds of manufacturing in them, among other things, and then thus the nature of the roll-up doors. But they could have things. I mean, you could have a micro brewing kind of operation. You could have a place where people come and visit. So you could have some kind of restaurant use. I mean, it's a commercial building, so there's a lot of latitude there. So I think what will be key in our discussion or in the criteria, I've conditioned it to include this pedestrian walkway, but I think it's important that there be some level of judicious application of what that means. So where it's appropriate or where it might make sense to provide direct pedestrian access might be specifically between the sidewalk and the building. It could be also the sidewalk and the building to F Street, so that one could access the building. I think my understanding of this criterion, Commissioner Clark, the way I read it, is that we're looking for safety for people who might be walking specifically across drive aisles. So what the city perhaps is not looking for is an older style development where there's a big parking lot and a person has to walk in the aisle in order to access the front door of a building. So I think what we'll find is that there are a number of creative ways to address this. One way could be to provide some kind of refuge along the west alignment where the landscaping will be, and provide a short crosswalk across the drive aisle to access both buildings. And that, I think, would satisfy the criteria. So there are several options. But you also kind of hit on a different criterion, which has to do with the separation of a building from a drive aisle or a parking area. And that separation can be made either through the provision of a walkway or landscaping. And the intent with that criterion is to prevent cars from striking the building. So 5 feet, you'll notice that if you look around, nearly every building that's been built in the last 20 years has about 5 feet of space. And that, I believe, is a building code requirement as well. So there's some particular attention to separating parking spaces from the building. So you can do that in a variety of ways, either through bollards. You can separate the grade by putting a curb, or you can use wheel stops to create that separation.
Okay. And then if you guys don't mind, I got a couple other questions too. One of them had to do with just I guess on the southern end of the site design, is talking about gravel parking, but it looks to me like the gravel, like half of the driveway access point is gravel and half of it will be asphalt. That seems strange. I don't know where to go with that, but am I looking at that correctly?
I see what you see, Commissioner Clark, and I would encourage deferral of that question to the applicant.
Okay.
When or if they would like to share.
And then the last question that I had, which we actually didn't talk about too much in the findings of fact, but it came across in the staff report, I think, had to do with buildings being over 10,000 square feet being sprinklered or to have a 2-hour firewall. And I didn't see where it mentioned that there was going to be a 2-hour firewall. I did see where it says on the blueprint that there is not going to be sprinklers. So I don't know if that's something that we need to add into like the conditions of approval or what, but that was noted.
Another good observation, Commissioner, and I would also defer this to the applicant with one caveat that because an applicant's prerogative is to divide up their building using building materials if they so choose, and there also is I believe there's a fire hydrant at F Street right at the corner there. It's about 25 feet west of the immediate corner. We're of the understanding that when they bring in architectural or construction plans, that they'll have to identify spaces and separation within the building so that it complies with the fire code. That falls under the section related to fire code at the very end of our findings. It's not typically something, though, that I get too deep into. So it's on page 26, right after streetlights. It just says basically that they're going to have to test the fire hydrant. That mostly is related to fire hydrant. And we could very well say and compliant with any other required fire code criterion related to sprinkling and separation. I'd be happy to add that.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Are there any other questions for Maddie? No? Okay. Well, let's go ahead and move forward. Would the applicant like to say anything to support your or to make your case on why we should approve this?
This is Jim, and I don't really have any comments at this point. I'm glad that the gravel halfway through the southern entrance was brought up. I think that's just a fluke, you know, and it's probably not the way it's really going to look.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Is there anything else?
Nope, that's it.
Okay. Thank you so much. Okay. Do any commissioners have questions for the applicant at this time? No? Okay. All right. We will go ahead and close the hearing, 5:45. And we will deliberate now. So what do you guys think of this?
Looks good to me.
I think it's great. I'm happy to see somebody making an expansion.
Yeah, I'm happy for the construction. I appreciate the improvements you made to the other building on the 1200 lot. So that makes me really happy, kind of thinking what the potential development is going to be for this.
Mm-hmm.
It would be interesting to know if he's got any potential tenants already.
Oh yeah, that's a good question. I like that.
Awesome. All right. Are you guys ready to make a motion then? Yes. Who would like to do so?
Okay, Dave will do it, I guess.
Thank you.
It is hereby ordered that the Creswell Planning Commission conditionally approve the brick shop site design review SR-2021-02 based on the information in the staff report and the findings of fact as amended.
I second.
All right. All those in favor, hands please. All right. That looks unanimous, Maddie.
Excellent. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And congratulations to Jim on this. I think we're all really excited to see how this looks when it's done. And I hope it works out that you get that building full as soon as possible, because that's going to be awesome to see. Thank you guys so much for signing on to our meeting here.
Thank you, guys. Have a good evening.
You as well.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks so much.
Okay. Next. Economic Development Project Advisory Committee. Maddie, it's all you.
Thank you, Chair. You may remember that in 2019, we started a project that was called the Land Needs Analysis, and part of that included something called an Economic Opportunities Analysis, and that focused primarily and arguably only on land needs for employment over the next 20 years. The city proceeded with the housing needs analysis, and that was recommended by the Planning Commission and adopted by the Council in December of 19. And then you went ahead and did those efficiency measures that amended our code to allow for residential uses, say in downtown and in other places throughout the city. What we have not done yet is we have not come back to the economic opportunities side of that project. So in light of that, and also in the interest of expanding the scope a little bit, the city, both the city manager and myself, staff, are interested in pursuing kind of like another component of that project related specifically to economic development strategies. And that work will be working with Lane Council of Governments to put together. And a part of that project, or a big stewardship role within that project, would be developing or bringing together an advisory committee to check in with our consultant, to guide some of the discussions, and to speak to particularly local economic development strategies and help us to shape policies around Goal 9, which is economic opportunity. So we'll keep the nuts and bolts, the analysis that we did from before, and probably update it to be more current. But the work that we'll do with the advisory committee will largely be newer and more open-minded and thinking about how does Creswell support economic development, what kinds of competitive advantages do we have, and how can we capitalize on those. So some components of that look and sound like ways that we have in the past worked with the chamber about inventorying businesses and engaging businesses more regularly in conversations about how we move forward on investments, but also looking and thinking about how the city of Creswell better provides employment land or employment opportunities, which typically is limited in Creswell related to access to utilities and services. So how to make more of our employment land, commercial and industrial land, ready for development. So I'm looking for interest and who would like to participate in that advisory role from the Planning Commission, and it could be more than one person. And I think generally, if you're not interested specifically as a commissioner, if you know someone who owns a business or has some background in economic development, we'd very much like to reach out to the folks that you might know and bring in as many voices to the conversation as are feasible.
Maddie, I don't have any previous experience with economic development positions. And so I guess my only interest in being part of the committee is that I have interest in the development of Creswell. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that really qualifies me.
I think you could be one or the other, Susan. You could be a planning commissioner and participate, or you could be a business owner. Or if you're Seth Clark, you could be both.
Don't look at me.
There's no forced, no pressure to do it, but please do, if you can, solicit someone, or Jessica Lanstra. My apologies, you're wearing your Farmlands hat. I overlooked that. So in any way, you could be qualified because you are a representative of the Planning Commission and you review development of commercial opportunities. And then, or otherwise, you could be an owner or a business manager or someone who is in a business of some kind operating in Creswell and similarly be qualified.
Maddie, is there I don't even know what it would be called, a white paper, I guess, on like what this would entail? I don't have a lot of time, so I don't know if I could do this, but I actually know some people that I think might fit the bill.
Okay. I have a very early project profile that I could share. I think a lot of it just to give you some insight, some of the objectives and actions are to create and implement this plan, which seeks to revitalize downtown, leverage the city's assets to attract overnight stays and visitors, develop an economic development strategy for including infrastructure for vacant commercial and industrial land, and integrate hobby field into our policies and our land use environment. And then the second half of it is related to that work that we did around the economic opportunities analysis, which is buildable land and whether or not we have enough. And there's maybe a third component of it that's related to economic resilience and trying to help existing businesses grow more resilient to economic fluctuations in the market and some of the idiosyncrasies that come with that. But I'd be happy to do a little bit of editing on this draft that I have because it's all covered in notes, and provide it to you just if you want to be the solicitor for me.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, send me something. I'll talk to. I have two names that are coming to mind that I wouldn't mind talking to see if there's interest.
Sounds great.
I'd be
Thank you.
interested in that paperwork as well.
Sure.
Is this just part of? I don't know how to word this quite. Since we don't really have a chamber anymore, does this have to do with that at all, or is this just completely separate?
No, Chair, this is actually related directly to our to completing our update of the comprehensive plan. As we move into the work that will start in the next fiscal year related to the growth boundary amendment, we have to address policies around all of these areas. That, and also, I think from a growth perspective, this is a very ripe moment for opportunities to engage the business community. And I do have just a tidbit. I don't have much detail about it, but I did hear that the chamber is back in operation. So they may have recruited enough new board members to be able to meet. And so I think I only heard about it in the context of the 4th of July fireworks.
Would you send me that document when you finish editing it too?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Just by a show of hands, is there anyone on this from this group that would be willing, if we needed a planning commissioner specifically, to participate? I see Susan's hand. Excellent. Jessica, awesome. Okay, if I share those two names and then I send out some material to those of you who just expressed interest, or perhaps to everyone, just a summary of the project so you can shop it around, that would be wonderful. And that's all I got on that.
All right. Staff development summary then.
Thank you, Chair. You just heard the latest and greatest of construction project news. So thank you for your approval of Site Review 2021-02. I have, and John, our planning specialist, have both been kind of pedal to the metal on helping applicants get to the public hearing process and or get through some of their building permits and other things. What I do have to report is that there are many of those houses up on Craig Estates 3rd Edition, Owens Way, are under construction. They've received planning review approval. I think they're selling pretty quickly. And I do know that the Super 8 345 East Oregon Avenue project is full steam ahead with some plumbing and electrical work happening inside the building. So you may see some activity there. Holbrook Apartments that you approved at the March meeting. The Holbrook Apartments are in the process of developing their construction plans, and the city will be installing a line stop in that transmission line that serves the whole city. So hopefully, all things going well, you won't notice any interruption throughout the construction of that project. and they intend, I believe, to break ground on at or around July 5th, so just after the 4th of July. And again, that's a 21-unit development on Holbrook Lane. Otherwise, regarding current construction, we got our first separate accessory dwelling unit application from Nathan Marple up on Crestwood Drive. So if you're at the corner of Crestwood and Cameron Loop, you'll be able to see it behind the house that he's building right now. So that's pretty neat. I think it's a pretty cool design, but perhaps I'm a little biased. It's kind of like a 2-story, little lofted, kind of 1-bedroom unit. Let's see, what else is going on? We hear some scuttle. We're still working with those applicants at 345 East Oregon about buying the right-of-way, and I believe Michelle Amberg recently received approval to execute that purchase when the timing in the project arrives, to buy at least the first portion of the roadway. It's about 160 feet off of Oregon Avenue at the southbound on-off ramp, to move south towards the old mill site. And we're waiting to hear some news or some changes that might be happening related to how far we can extend that purchase. So more to come on that, hopefully soon. And there's been a little bit of interest around on the east side related to adult care facilities, like a memory care facility at or around the corner of Melton and Emerald Parkway on some vacant land, which I think is encouraging, in the interest of seeing and hearing about all kinds of housing options for folks. And let me just I've had a couple conversations with Travel Lane County. They've got some funding and some coordination going on around kiosks. They're really interested in putting kiosks in one at our bicycle wayside park, and another that the city might pursue a grant on to connect folks to downtown from that facility. So trying to connect visitors as a welcoming option to bring them into town.
Like an informational kiosk?
Exactly. Informational, it could have amenities listed on it, like what's great to see around the city or in the immediate surrounds. And then the one in downtown would likely be oriented towards wayfinding, to help visitors sort out where things are and get a good sense of where they are in the city.
Wouldn't want them getting lost in the huge metropolis of Creswell.
You never know, David. But generally speaking, we're things are moving and shaking, and people are. I've heard a lot of interest, a lot of real estate interest in a lot of properties throughout the city. So this may be a very, very warm, if not hot, summer season of real estate activity.
What about that RV park idea?
No further interest on that particular site regarding the RV park, but we have had one other interest raised, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Susan, because I have not been neglecting the RV park standards intentionally, but you will notice that we've had 2 site review hearings back to back, March and April, so I've been working hard. But the standards are in the works. I'm getting ready to notice for that. That's going to be a legislative amendment change to our development code, so I've got some work to do on that front. But we did have an interest request regarding the property around TJ's, that land that's immediately adjacent to the freeway. And generally speaking, the party line at City Hall is that we've got big ideas for that area. And we're hoping that the use that develops there is beneficial to the community, both from a property development and tax perspective, and also from a utilization of limited land that we have. So I'm not sure that that's the best place for an RV park, but it certainly is something that they can consider. Frankly, I think that the ODOT requirements for access are going to be very challenging to meet in that location.
Boy, I'll say, and isn't that the area that has no sewer or utilities?
There are limited utilities. It's true.
So it's not shovel ready. So hasn't that always been the holdup with that property?
I think that there are ways, if you wanted to build a building there are ways to extend the water and sewer appropriately. It's just making it pencil out. I think that has been the challenge.
Okay.
Maddie, after experiencing Cottage Grove's planning and the city using the MUPTI a whole bunch, hopefully Creswell has not got that in their little book of things they want to use.
No, Commissioner Christopher, I do not believe that Creswell is pursuing multi-unit property tax exemption as a means to encourage development. I think we're seeing a fair amount of multi-unit development already this year, and I know that is a very effective way to encourage the building of those types of multi-units for residential use. I think what will be interesting for us to watch is how that hits the tax rolls or doesn't hit the tax rolls, and kind of how that looks. For better or worse, Creswell does not have the depth of budget capacity to be able to offer that level of exemption. So we're a little bit limited in our ability to pursue it.
Just in my opinion, good.
Point taken.
Any word on what phase we're at with the Super 8?
I know that they've pulled a plumbing and an electrical permit, and I know those were substantial permits. They had to do quite a bit of design work for both. There'll be 47 units, so I think they did quite a bit of realignment of the infrastructure to that building, or within that building. Last I heard, they were still working with Jason Bush to address some of the damage that was caused by the fire, or the short duration of fire, and then the subsequent inundation by the fire department. So I think that there's still a fair amount of assessment going on at the site, but I do know that the owners are eager to keep that on the rails. But I'd be happy to provide you with updates at the next meeting.
Excellent. Thank you for all the preparation you did for tonight's meeting. It's a lot.
I think it's just a sign that good things are happening in the community, and there's a lot of interest. And I frankly couldn't be happier to be busy with new construction of commercial buildings and seeing projects get off the ground. Speaking of getting projects off the ground, one other thing, there's a bit of scuttle and discussion about some parkland at Grasslands Road. I don't know if anyone's heard about that, but you may have seen it on social media. There was a post, I got a couple emails about it today. But Grasslands I guess we could call it Grasslands Park, but it's not designated parkland. It's actually owned by the Water Fund. And in the future, there is a part of our water master plan includes an in-ground water tank on that site to serve new development that occurs and to increase our ability to serve areas of the city that are to the north. And in the interim, before that phase of our water system comes online or gets constructed, the Parks and Tree Board has asked to utilize the land as open space for the community. So you'll see that Public Works is installing a sidewalk along the property, and they've decommissioned a facility that used to be a pump house and infrastructure related to it. But in the future, I believe there will be some kind of facility on site where there might be as much as a little bicycle pump track for kids to play on, or big kids, adults could also play on it. But there's some discussion in the works of creating that, and there are some more details. I'm not as engaged in that project because staff to the Planning Commission is Mitch Rhodes from Public Works and Michelle Amberg. So if you all would like more information about that, I could certainly find out and get you some for the next meeting. Just so that you're all in the know. Someone of your neighbor kids might ask. And as a planning commissioner, again, my job is to make you look excellent.
And you're so good at that.
I can only try, Susan, but I always strive for greater.
Don't we all?
All right. Is that everything? Do you have any more questions for the, okay. Next meeting is Thursday, May 20th of 2021. Unless it gets changed, I suppose. So, leave that open to Maddie, I guess. But yeah, thank you guys for coming, and participating in our public hearing and all the other good things. So let Maddie or I know if you can't make the meeting as well, so we can plan accordingly. And everybody have a good evening and enjoy the weather. Thank you, Maddie.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners. Have a great evening.
Thank you all.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.